Okay, so now we're back into SoftyMod. You could see how when you work with a mixed pipeline environment, you will be jumping around from software to software all the time. That's perfectly normal. Lots of people do this on a daily basis. So, back in SoftyMod, I'm in a blank scene. This is a brand new, unsaved scene. I didn't open an example file. I'm going to use this scene to get this started. So what I need to do is I need to bring in the work that I did in ZBrush, the high-res sculpt that I did in ZBrush. I need to bring that into SoftyMod and use that for normal mapping. So it's pretty simple to do. First things first, I need to import my OBJ file, which I conveniently placed in my models directory. It's this one here called sample panel from ZBrush.obj. And I'm not going to import the material or the UVs or any of that stuff. Don't need any of that. I'm going to hit OK and bring this guy in. It may take a little while to import it. It's a pretty big mesh. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was loading up the file, you could see in the data that the file is almost 200 megabytes big. So these high-res sculpts that come from a program like ZBrush are actually pretty big files. They're pretty heavy, pretty dense. Okay, so it may take a little while to import it here into SoftyMod, but don't worry about it. One of the areas that SoftyMod actually excels at is handling super high-res, high polygon objects in the real-time viewport, which is pretty cool. Okay, so it finished importing, and here is the object. Let me switch over to a shaded view so you can see this. Here's the object. Let me hide the grid. You can see the object here. The lighting looks pretty good. It's very, very high-res, very dense mesh. You can see all of our details from ZBrush are on here, which is pretty cool. And then we can normal map this. So it's pretty much the same process that I covered in a previous video. Now let me go ahead and turn on my viewport stats here so I can see the triangle count we're working with here. You can see this object is, well, it's just under 6 million triangles, which is a pretty heavy mesh. It will allow us to get a pretty good detailed normal map. Okay, so basically it's the same process that we saw in a previous video when I used sub-Ds to model a high-res object and normal map it. The main difference is that in order to get all this sculpting detail, it'd be extremely difficult and almost non-feasible to do that inside of SoftyMod. It would be pretty insane. Doing that in ZBrush is much easier, much faster, and much more efficient. Okay, so pretty simple. I'm just going to go to primitive polygon mesh. I'm going to create myself a grid, and I'm going to take the subdivisions, knock that down to 1 and 1. This is going to be our low-res object. As I've stated before, we want to make sure the object is within the high-res object. Somewhere around the middle is pretty good. Okay. Now the low-res object is going to be the one receiving the normal map from the high-res, so it needs to be UV map. So if we look right now in the texture editor, you can see it's got no UVs. So we'll go to Property, Texture Projection, do a planar XZ projection. We'll just check, and there's the UVs. Okay, perfect. I'll just go to Property. I'm going to pull up the Ultimapper and lock that PPG down. I'm going to go to Pick, and I'm going to pick the high-res object, which you can see is extremely dense. That should pretty much do it. Now the next thing is just to decide where the file is going to be saved to, this normal map. So it's going to have the prefix of grid in front of the name, which is perfectly fine. Targa is fine. I'll do it as a targa, and I'll do normal and tangent space. Down here, we probably want to compute some of this stuff and set our resolution options. Now, because this is a very dense mesh, when I hit compute, it's going to automatically, analyze and scan the model. But because it's so dense, and look how dense this is, the wireframe is so dense that you pretty much can't even see through it. This is going to go ahead and compute for us automatically. Now, because the high-res mesh is so dense, so high-res, this could take a little while to go ahead and compute this out. So I'll just pause the video and skip ahead. So it took a good maybe 15-20 seconds to compute that. Keep in mind also I'm using the 64-bit version of SoftyMod 2011.5. Very important. If you're not using a 64-bit pipeline, you are going to run into serious memory issues. I strongly suggest for anyone out there following along with this tutorial whether you're a professional game developer or maybe you're an indie or student, someone just breaking into the industry. You want to make sure to use a 64-bit pipeline whenever possible. It can make all the difference. It can make or break your next project. So very important. Alright, so now that that's been computed, it's computed the distance to surface and the depth range, all that good stuff. Now it's pretty simple. All we need to do is set the resolution and the quality. Obviously, the higher we set the resolution, the better quality it's going to be. I'm going to set this to about 1K, so 1024 by 1024 should work out pretty good. You can do this at medium quality or high or highest. Obviously, if you go to highest, it's going to take much longer time to render out the normal map. And keep in mind, because this mesh is so complex and so heavy, it's going to take a good while to go ahead and normal map this object. So I'm going to go with a setting of, you know what, let's just go to highest. And I think I might, usually I do 2K, 2K or higher. In this case I'm going to go with 1K, simply because I want this to render out pretty fast. I'm going to go with high, just for tutorial reasons, to get this done fast and not sit here and wait a long time for rendering. However, for yourself, I would recommend going with 2K and putting it at the highest quality level. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click on generate. It's going to ask me if I want to overwrite the previous normal map. I'm going to hit yes. That's perfectly fine. It's going to go ahead and give you the status bar down here and start normal mapping. In this case, it's going to take a good while, simply because the high-res mesh is so dense, as I've stated before. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video, skip ahead, and pick back up again when this thing finishes. Okay, so it wrapped up. For me, it literally took about a minute, probably around 60 seconds, something like that. It was actually pretty quick. Alright, what I'm going to do next is go to the preview shader tree over here. I'm going to hide the high res, so we just see the low res. Now I'm going to create myself a mental ray preview, like we've done before. And then I'll just render this out, see what it looks like. Awesome, so you can see that the simple polygon plane retained a lot of the detail from the high-res object, all these scratches, the dents. So it's a pretty good example showing you the basic process of going between Softimage and ZBrush, sculpting in ZBrush, bringing all that stuff back into Softimage, normal mapping it using Softimage's excellent, Ultimapper normal mapping tools and stuff, and getting this thing ready for a game. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, make sure you save this scene here. We're actually going to be coming back to this object when we get it ready to import into the game engine. So at this point, I'm just going to save this out, stop here. I'll see you in the next video as we continue with this tutorial.